Here's today's First Word Daily Devotion.
Let's do something a little different today on August the 18th. Let's start in our New Testament reading, and then we'll come back to Esther, as well as we will look at the Psalms. The New Testament reading, of course, is 2 Corinthians 10, the first 12 verses. Notice what Paul says: "The weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds. We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, take every thought captive to place it under the obedience of Christ." Or, as the ESV says, take every thought captive to obey Christ, being ready to punish every disobedience when your obedience is complete. And so Paul here, he's balancing this boldness with genuine concern. Here he is, he's entreating by the meekness and gentleness of Christ. And this is going to become important because there's something going on that we're not exactly sure of, the historical occasion for his writing the letter. We know details because he's given us the details, but what brought about his writing, the only way we can have access to that is what's in the text. And so we don't necessarily need to speculate what's behind the text. We need to deal with the text. But he has boldness, and he balances that boldness with genuine concern. Look at what is before your eyes, he says. If anyone is confident that he is Christ, let him remind himself that just as he is Christ, so also are we. So here he is having to defend his ministry again and defend his apostleship to these Corinthians. And he's going to make that a little more explicit he's going to make that, I should say, a little more personal in our reading tomorrow. But let's turn back then to Esther. We're going to close the book of Esther today, and it's going to be exciting to see how the book of Esther closes. Let's look at chapter 8, beginning at verse 1. We'll look at the first couple of verses. On that day, King Ahasuerus gave to Queen Esther the house of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. Now, look at the way that Haman is mentioned. Here he is, the enemy of the Jews. And we knew that all along, and now it's explicit. And Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told what he was to her. So here, remember, Esther, when she first met the king, she did not disclose who she was, but now, after all of this is said and done, she says her relation to Mordecai. The king took off his signet ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai, and Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. And look in particular at verse 11. If you remember back the edict that the king gave concerning the Jews, in verse 11 we're seeing some of that same language. It's almost as if, well, it's not almost as if, it is explicitly the edict that the king gave is being reversed. Look at the language. The language tells the story. Verse 11, saying that the king allow the Jews who are in every city together and defend their lives, to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate, we've seen those three words before, any armed force of any people or province that might attack. And we see that happening. Let's look, for example, at verse 17. Many from the people of the country declared themselves Jews, for fear of the Jews had fallen on them. Now remember where Israel is. Israel is in exile. And why are they in exile? They're in exile because of their disobedience. And here's the lesson that the people of God are clinging to. Here's the lesson that through revelation, that is, the book of Esther, that God wants his people to cling to. He wants his people to cling to the fact that he is a God of steadfast love, and he has not forgotten the promises. So here they are, even in exile. They are away from their homeland, but they are not away from the heart of God. He loves them, and he loves them with a never-failing love. And even though they are disobedient, he remains faithful. Again, as we're going to look as we get deeper into our New Testament reading, he is faithful even when we are faithless, because he cannot deny himself. And there again, look on the next page here at chapter 9. This is verse 1, I believe it is. The reverse occurred. The Jews gained mastery over those who hated them. So at chapter 8 and verse 11, there's the reverse of the edict. And in chapter 9 and verse 1, it becomes now explicit that the reverse has occurred. And I love the way that Esther ends. Esther ends at chapter 10, verse 1. We'll read the whole chapter 10. Let's do that today. Let's read a whole chapter in our everyday podcast, First Word Daily Devotional. Now, the chapter is only 3 verses, so here we go. King Ahasuerus imposed tax on the land, on the coastlands of the sea, all the acts of his power and might, and the full account of the high honor of Mordecai to which the king advanced him. Are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia? For Mordecai, the Jew, was second in rank to King Ahasuerus, and he was great among the Jews and popular with a multitude of his brothers, for he sought the welfare of his people and spoke peace to all his people. Now, again, we're learning as we read the Bible, we're learning the language of the Bible. And notice, Mordecai's exchange should remind us, or this passage concerning Mordecai should remind us of another figure that we've seen. And that figure, of course, is Joseph. Joseph, remember? Joseph was second in the land of Egypt. And here is Mordecai. Look at the explicitness of the text. Mordecai, a Jew, is second in the land of the Mede and Persians. Psalm 44, we really understand Psalm 44. It really comes off the page after our Esther reading. And so let's look at it, in particular at verse 17. All this has come upon us, though we have not forgotten you. We have not been false to your covenant. And so here is Psalm 44 again, recounting Exodus, recounting exile, recounting the faithfulness of the Lord. Verse 21, for he knows the secret of our heart. And then here's our prayer, and we'll end our time today praying this way at Psalm 44:26. Rise up, come to our help, redeem us for the sake of your steadfast love. Now that's a theme, isn't it? A theme that we've seen repeated time and time again. And thank our good Lord, thank God in heaven, that he will not let us forget that he is a God of steadfast love.